Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me come today and talk about this a little bit. I've been on the MLS committee for, I think this is my fourth year. I'm in my second round, 3 years apiece, right? So I think it's the fourth year. Yes, I started first year of COVID, 2020. And it's been really enlightening to be on the MLS committee because I see the thought process of the information that goes into MLS. And I don't think most people realize how much appraisers depend on the MLS. It is our Bible. It is where we go to for information. And we have to take it for what it is. And I'm very interested in the quality of the information that goes in the MLS. I'm very big on making sure that the information is correct. But again, going back to one of the first things I just said was, my whole point of being here today is to basically beg for long-term rental information. And the reason being is, this little form here is called the single family comparable rent schedule. And for those of you familiar with it, if a buyer is buying a property, whether it's a rental property or not, it could be an existing rental property, it could be something vacant. But if they need the income from the property to qualify for the loan, the lender will order what's called the Form 1007, which is what this is, it's the comp rent schedule. And from here, they will determine, the appraiser determines market rent for property, and then they use that to justify their loan. For years, and I will openly admit it, appraisers knew we were doing this wrong, that we were filling out this form incorrectly. This form does not allow for short-term rentals. It specifically is meant for long-term rentals. In other words, if Fannie Mae is going to be buying a loan, if it is a conforming loan and Fannie Mae is going to package it up and send it to the investors, market rent must be based on long-term rent, not short-term rental. Fannie Mae and the investors do not care whether or not there's furniture and TVs and, shower curtains and plates and cups and new pool furniture. They don't care about that information. They want to know what the real estate itself can generate in rent. We were all filling this out incorrectly. However, last June, Fannie Mae clearly said, stop doing it. There are things in place for them to kind of look for market rent based on short-term rentals, and they may not purchase the loan or, purchase the loan at that point. They have a lot of checks and balances within their system to kind of weed out that kind of stuff, but they made it very clear, like, this is your warning. Do not do it anymore. If we need income, it needs to be based on long-term rent. Yes.
So zero short-term rental income should not be.
If it is a Fannie Mae loan and they are trying to send it up and package it and send it to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac as well, rental income needs to be based on long-term rent. And here's why. For purposes of doing the loan, they don't ever ask for expense information. All they want to know is how much will it rent for. And the reason being is they can use 75% of the monthly rent and go, okay, we're just going to assume a 25% expense ratio, 75% of monthly income we can apply to this person's income for the loan purposes. How many short-term rentals do you know of operate at a 25% expense ratio? Not a lot. They need to be generating several hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to operate at a 25% expense ratio. So there were probably a lot of loans made based on short-term numbers where they just applied that 75%. And we all know it costs more to operate short-term rental than 25% of income. A lot of loans here aren't conforming loans. They're non-conforming. They go to other investors. But the problem is most appraisal requests I see, whether it's a conforming or non-conforming loan, says it must conform to Fannie Mae standards. Fannie Mae sets the bar for basically every appraisal done for lending purposes. Most appraisals done for lending purposes. So we get back to well, it's non-conforming, it is a short-term rental, they need short-term rental information, but that doesn't conform to Fannie Mae. So then it goes to a conversation with the lender. Hey, this is a short-term rental. I can do it based on short-term. I can't give you this form. My estimate of income, really, because that's what this is income. A year's worth monthly average is short-term, and I can give you all this information narratively. I can't put it on this form. Fannie Mae says, do not put it on this form. So there's been a little bit of I'm not gonna say a little bit, there's been a lot of confusion and issues with lenders still requesting this when they know they kind of don't need it, but their systems are set up to look for this form when they get a loan. You know, everything's electronic now. It goes through all this underwriting and review, and all it does is say, hey, we have this 1007 form, and they say market rent is $5,000. They're not reading it. They're not looking at it. You know, it's just checking a box. So there are some lenders that are better than others about going, yeah, just put it narratively, just give us the information we need to know. But my point in telling you all this is there is a lack of short-term rental information in MLS. We have a whole category there for long-term rentals. I think within the past year, there've only been 21 properties entered in there. Some of them will get advertised and then withdrawn, you know, and they don't, some of the agents don't follow through with putting the rental information in. That's got better in the past year or so. I looked up properties that have sold, maybe actually just put in MLS in the past 12 months in Dare County that had long-term tenant occupants, because I look under the showing instructions. This is how I have to dig up long-term rental information. I have to dig through every listing there is out there and look for long-term rental information. If I'm doing a property where they need this form and it can be rented long-term, you know, no one's going to rent a 10-bedroom oceanfront long-term. And there's no way of converting short-term to long-term rental information. I can't say, oh, well, it rents 10,000 a month average, short-term, and we're going to call it 5,000, you know, long-term. There's no way to convert that. So my point is really to come here and beg for you guys to ask your agents and even within your companies to start putting long-term rental information in MLS. Yes.
So when Fannie Mae is looking at this, are they looking at the historical run of things regardless of what she may want to do going forward?
And see, this is what I don't know. And that would be more of a lender question. And so I really have, when I get an appraisal request, I'm not given any of this information. They don't tell me what their intention is. They don't tell me what the loan amount is, what they're trying to do. I know none of that information because none of that really is relevant to what a property is worth. They just say, hey, we need you to appraise this property, and we also need to know the market rent for it. So it can be assumed that, you know, they're using it as I don't really know on their end. I do know I have had a handful of properties where the people did not qualify for the loan otherwise. They were trying to get their credit scores up or whatever it is. And they say, hey, we'll finance it as a investment property and get the income, but I'm really planning to live in it. And then when my credit bounces back, I'll just do a refinance. Well, I'm sorry, if you're putting on there that it's an investor loan, but you plan to live in it year round. I mean, that's not on me. That's somebody else's problem. You know what I mean? So it really doesn't matter what it is currently used at or what it has been or what it's going to be. If they're asking me for this information, it's what I've got to give them.
So historically, if it's been all short-term rate income and a buyer is wanting to finance it, our message to them is you can't count that towards your income if they were paying a.
Actually, the appraiser update June of last year, it's only 2 pages, but it's very specific about what happens with market rent. It's titled Short-Term Rentals and Form 1007. And basically, if they don't need the income to qualify for the loan, they can still put it on their loan application, but it is treated as business income. If they need the income to qualify for the loan, then it needs to be, when it is appraised and they are asking for market rent, it needs to be done based on long-term rental information. So again, the whole point in telling everybody this is there can be a disconnect in what the property actually does in rental income as short-term. And we all know that they all sell consistently based on short-term rental income. Buyers and sellers, they're all talking about short-term rental income. But when it gets handed to the appraiser then is asked to do an analysis based on long-term.
So is anyone perceiving this as a problem at the lender level or at the Fannie Mae level, or?
They,
Done on purpose, they want to keep it that way?
it was done on purpose to let it, this was the warning. It was the warning to say, hey, everybody, we know you're doing it and you need to stop. And from now on, appraisers walk on eggshells all the time and we all just feel a little, everybody's nervous. There's this nervousness among everyone, like, oh, what are they gonna get us for next? And personally, I think with this warning that they gave us last year, should some of these mortgages start going bad, I think they're gonna, you know, I'm worried they're gonna come back to the appraisers and say, well, you told us market rent was this. Well, that's based on short term and not long term. And, you know, the loan was made under false information.
So Charity, what you're asking us to do is if we're getting ready to list a property.
Yes,
And it's in a short-term rental program.
yes.
You're asking us to go to the property managers and ask them to give us a long-term rental estimate. Property and upload that in the listing when we list it for sale.
It would be extremely helpful.
That's what you need.
We need, and also let your buyers know. And if again, they're going, well, hey, they're gonna take 75% of the income for the loan. Well, not if it's short term. You know, we all know short term.
Right, we put that, yeah.
Right, it operates at a higher expense than that. So, hey, by the way, you need to possibly let your borrowers know, for purposes of the appraisal, it has to be done long-term. Okay, again, it really depends on the lender and what they ask for. If it's a knowledgeable lender and they're not doing a conforming loan, then they may ask for short-term rental analysis. And some of them are specifically going, hey, it's a short-term, we want short-term rental analysis.
But should it be our standard of practice when we're listing a property to not only get a rental projection, which
Yes.
is what you do.
Right.
Short term, but also ask for a long-term rental projection.
I think the conversation needs to start including long-term rental potential. I have brought up with the MLS committee, maybe adding fields in the income, in the financial section, you know, long-term potential, monthly rent, you know, actual rent, because there are some out there renting and then the agents never follow through in MLS putting that information in there. There were 26 properties listed for sale in the past 12 months that had a long-term tenant in it when it was listed. Only 3 agents actually stated the amount of income it was generating. That would have been very, very helpful from an appraiser to know, which a lot of times it could be rented to a family member. Maybe it's been rented to the same person for 10 years. It may not be renting for market rent, market rates. The information is still good to have. And I know Ann is on here and Morissette, and if she would like to chime in, that would be nice too. But and actually, the problem for me has been an upset buyer. I did one for, the person was a real estate agent buying a house, KDH West Side. They asked for the income. I did it based on long-term, and this agent was extremely upset, going, hey, it's gonna do more of this. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, you know, first of all, you're not my client. The bank is. The bank asked me to do this. And by the way, bottom line numbers, you're probably better off doing it long-term than short-term. Your bottom line would be better long-term for certain properties than short-term. I just want to open the conversation up to talk about long-term income potential for properties and not focus solely on short-term. We need the data. I have turned down work because of it. It takes a lot of time to dig through every listing in hopes of finding a long-term rental. I'm resorting to Facebook to find long-term rental information because that's where I find the most. And certain websites, you know, agents, companies will post them on their websites, and that's what I'm having to turn to. Yes.
What about you change the field where we have to say, is it a rental and then the company, why don't we change it to no long-term, short-term, so that way at least you have the ability to see that without going through every listing, you can just do a search based on. And then, if they say it's a short-term, the drop-down comes with
Yes.
company names.
Yes.
I mean, that's a simple type of change.
It is, and that was all discussed, and then it basically was said, nobody, are people gonna use it?
But you have to use, it's a required field.
Right.
now To say, no, or pick the
Yes.
company, so you have to put an answer. in.
Right, right,
If you can't move forward, kind of like DocuSign.
right, right.
I mean, it may be just a simple thing to help you at
Right.
least get process started.
Right, and I'm all for it, we've discussed it, we've been busy with the NAR settlement and some other things that have really kind of overshadowed this. And we'd even put a little task force together to try to get our heads together to get the word out there that, hey, we kind of need this information, but that's kind of fizzled out and. But yes, it's just, we need the information for this purpose. It's becoming extremely difficult on our end, and I feel like it's something they're really gonna start cracking down on. And if we have it's the disconnect between what potential buyers getting a loan are thinking and what they may see on an appraisal report. And if everybody knew that this is a potential, I'm not gonna say conflict, but a discrepancy, like, oh yeah, we know short-term will do this, but long-term will do this, then it opens up the conversation for people to, be aware that that may be an issue in their loan. I don't know, you guys tell me, have y'all had any experience with market rent not working out for your potential buyer? No? Yes,
I'm guessing that, in my experiences, which is limited, is that, usually in these rental companies, there's one person or one division that does long-term rentals, and then the other division handles the short-term rental,
Right.
which is a much larger base. So I think it'd be easy to get not all the companies do long-term rentals, there's only so
Right.
many that do it, so
Right.
all we have to do is get those specific people to provide the information to MLS and put it in as a data.
yeah, but there's no real benefit to them to do it, the property managers aren't required to put it in MLS, so why spend their time doing it, other than the fact that I'm out here begging for it, but, I don't know that they have the time or want to, and it's no real benefit to them to do it, I guess, I don't know. I don't know, and it is my goal to go to the property managers and bring this up, and really just to make everyone more aware of the situation we're in and the need for the information. Yes,
If you have a property that's a short-term rental and they take a winter tenant, let's say a 6-month tenant, you have to use a 1-year tenant for your comp, can use that 6 months.
it actually says monthly, and you can use a 6-month rental, but again, whether we're
Usually we usually
using,
build monthly the winter rental.
right, but again, that monthly rental rate isn't necessarily reflective of
Where's your one?
market. You actually can use, it doesn't have to be a 12-month. It actually just says monthly.
Can you extrapolate that?
No. No, there's no converting it, but yeah, so we wouldn't want to take just the 6 months from, say, October, through April versus doing April through, the 6 months can make a big difference here in the rental numbers. Right, we don't want to apply winter rental rates to a property for year round because that wouldn't be realistic. So we can use, if this weren't the Outer Banks and we were living somewhere else, it would be more appropriate to use just a 6 months rental. That really reflects kind of typical market rent. But here we're so seasonal, so that really doesn't work. If I had to use it, and I will tell you, I have had to dig stuff from everywhere and put in a 1007 and go, this looks terrible, but this is all I have. And I don't think they really read it. No one has ever questioned the data. They may question that final number, but they never question the rent comps. And I'm telling you, I have to quote Facebook and Craigslist in my appraisal reports for long-term rental information. Yes.
How old can that data be that's used for the rent comp?
I can use a sales comparable that's 3 years old if I make the adjustment for the market conditions. But again, I have to have support for the market conditions. And that's where it's beneficial to know the rental history long-term as well. Hey, rents have gone up 10-20% and whatever, hey, 3 years ago it was renting for 2,000, now it's renting for 2,700. So the history of all of it's important too. The projection is important. Fannie Mae says it has to be actual rentals. I have used for rent. I've not been busted on it yet because sometimes it's all I have, but they do want actual confirmed rentals, not for rent. But again, the projection is something that is more of a real time. Hey, it's projected, they think they can rent it for $3,000 this year and it was renting for 2,500 2 years ago. Again, I can extrapolate the market conditions adjustment based on that information. So if I have a 2-year-old rental that I'm using, I can make that percentage adjustment. So yes, I can use historical data as well, as long as I can support the adjustment.
So if you convert a long-term rental into a short-term rental, does that require some type of special filing with either the mortgage company or you just do?
I mean, I don't think they ever follow up. I think the problem is if the loan becomes a problem, and Fannie Mae now, they have a X amount of days, and I don't remember how long it is to request a repurchase from a lender. And basically that means you sold me a bad loan and we're asking you to take it back. They have a time limit to do that. When the mortgage meltdown happened in 2008, they went through every one of their bad loans. Every one of them. It took years, and they went back and figured out whether it was a bad loan, fraudulent information, bad appraisal, and they went after people. They said they went back to these lenders after all these years and said, you owe me for this loan. There's a time limit on what they can do with that now. I don't know if it's 90 days or 6 months. I probably should look that up before I came, but there's a time limit now on how long Fannie Mae has to review the loan and decide whether it was a good loan or not, But no, I mean, again, if you say that you're going to live in it year round, but you rent it out as an investment property and you've put on your loan application, you're living in it year round, intentionally knowing you're going to do something different. I mean, that's mortgage fraud, but that's not my problem. That's somebody else's problem. So they're not checking up on it unless something happens with the loan. As far as I know. Different lenders, some of these more investor lenders, I don't know what their requirements are. Yes.
So if we're listing a property that's a year-round rental and the tenant's moving out, you would really like us to put that rental history
Yes.
in there,
Yes.
even though we're not selling it as a.
Those are really the best because just like, you guys, we talk about short-term rentals, 10 times gross rent or whatever, that right there, it was renting at $2,500 a month and sold for, $600,000. I have to determine that. It was called a gross rent multiplier, and that is actually very good information to have.
If it's an owner rented property, what type of proof do you want? Because that's not like from a rental company.
Right.
What do you need differently?
And that's kind of where we bottomed out on the discussion of, well, if we make it a required field, yes, no, what kind of documents are we going to need? Are we going to be required to upload leases? And we kind of just.
We wouldn't have to do that. What kind of information would you like to have if they did provide?
I mean, a lease is always a great idea, but I rely on what you guys put in MLS.
Or
And if you put it,
a statement with the.
and if you put it in there and say, hey, they're telling me that they rent it for $3,000 a month, I saw a lease, or they did show me an income statement, or I talked to the tenant and they confirmed it, I'm going to go with it because at this point I have such little data that I have no choice. And I rely on MLS information completely for everything that we do. So if you guys put it in there, then I'm going to believe it.
So us just putting it in the remarks is good enough.
Again, I have to search that, and I will, I'll go to search remarks, search comments, tenant, rent. I mean, the time involved in really going through every listing, looking for that information is what's frustrating about the whole thing, because I know it's out there and I just can't find it. Yes,
I forgot.
okay,
That was good.
yeah, so.
Goods to be determined.
Yes, yes, and so I'm just making a push to get the word out there that we need it, and then maybe get ideas on the best way on how to get it out there. Yes, okay.
So other than misrepresentation or fraud on the part of a real estate agent, the person who's really on the line is you.
Yes, yes.
And my second question is, do you have any internal guidance with respect to what you think this may mean from obtaining mortgages for our clients? Is there gonna be a 20% non-qualifiable body? Is it 50? Is it?
That I don't know. That I really don't know. And investor loans are becoming increasingly harder to come by. Not everybody wants to do them. And they're so used to doing these conforming loans that they can just package up and send to Fannie Mae and keep moving on, that, it's getting a little harder to get investor loans, and every investor is different, and that I don't know.
And second homes would just require you have to qualify for.
I mean, second homes, I'm guessing that they're not needing the income to justify the purchase, so this could even be an issue. And I have had some vendors say, we'll just use what Zillow says is the estimate or their rent estimate. And I was like, that would be so much easier than me having to dig through this. Not that I don't want to do it. And actually, by our law, which is Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, if the income approach is necessary to produce credible assignment results, we're supposed to do it whether they ask for it or not. And anything generating several $100,000 a year is probably, mostly selling on income, so if it's necessary to support your estimate of market value, we're supposed to be doing it anyway. So sometimes whether they ask for it or not, I'm giving it to them in a narrative format, whether they need the income to justify it or not. But it's that form that really kind of, it's been kind of a mess ever since, and Ann can probably back me up on this. It's still, we're still working out the kinks. For every order I get that says, oh, we need the appraisal plus the 1007, I have to have a little blurb that says, okay, this is a short-term rental. Fannie Mae says it has to be based on long-term rent. I can do this for you based on short-term, but I'm telling you right now, my report will say this doesn't conform to Fannie. I will put it in narrative format and you do with it what you want. Most of them go with it. Some of them I never hear back from. So that just means that they had no idea what I was talking about, or they didn't understand, or they found somebody else to do it. And there are some appraisers still putting short-term rentals on the 1007, but I'm not doing it. I'm not having Fannie Mae put me on their exclusionary list. And again, I think that was their warning shot to let us all know that should things start to go south, that they're going to be looking for this.
Charity.
So,
Hey,
okay.
hey, it's Ann.
But the volumes.
Oh, and
Not
you're,
on her
Yeah.
end, on our end, I think the
Oh.
volumes turned down.
can I unmute her?
No, she's not muted.
Yes, is it?
Go down to your little audio at the very bottom left there and see
Yeah.
if you can do a volume.
Over on the right hand other side, there's an X button.
Oh, yeah, down your little tray here.
Oh, yeah, hold on. Volume up. There we go. And
Yes, can you hear me?
still can't hear you.
See what the output is to the.
Awesome. Now.
Yes.
I know, it's the worst. You're like, I'm up here talking, I can ring them like.
Yeah, it's showing her. Well, it's showing me, I guess. On
Yeah.
You,
Um,
Cancel speakerphone, can we have it through the owl? Well, let's see what that is. Oh, no, that is the owl. Maybe the owl needs to be turned up. It has a little plus and
Is
minus
there
buttons
lights
on
on
it.
the top?
What is that, like a mute?
Let's see, mute. This is it. Now in?
Can you hear me? Yay. Well, after all that, it wasn't all that important what I was gonna say, but yes, I agree with everything you've said, and I do have to also go through like looking for any words like long-term occupied and all of that, and then call people, and it takes an incredible amount of time, and since we did it wrong for so many years and it was pretty easy, the lenders think, well, we're only gonna pay $100 for it too. And there's so much work that I've turned down in the last year because I look at the time that it's gonna be and you just can't get it done in a reasonable amount of time. And so anything that helps us get this information, I know there are various agents that own rental homes that I've discovered over the years that I can call them and try to get it. But I mean, you wouldn't believe how much effort we have to go to find this information. And we are supposed to use actual rentals, and so projections are great, but they really don't cover what we need. So yes, just putting it in the comments, if you put long-term tenant occupied, if you can put in the comments what the rental amount is and maybe like, the lease will be terminated when it closed or whatever. So we have some idea of the time frame, but, yeah, any information is going to be so helpful.
I have spent longer doing that form on certain
Yes.
appraisal than I did on the entire appraisal report. I mean, I spent a whole day one day on a house and it was absolutely not worth the time, the fee they paid me for it. And sometimes the worst part about this is sometimes they'll order just a regular appraisal and then they'll come back a week or two later and go, oh, we need the rental information. Well, I wouldn't have even accepted this assignment had I known you wanted the rental information because I know how long it takes. I mean, it really is frustrating after the fact to get this request from lenders. It can be very time consuming and not worth the money they're willing to pay to have it done. Yes,
So if we don't notify our clients that only long-term rental can be used, do we have an exposure there?
that is, you're asking the wrong person. I have no idea. I mean, again, I just think the word needs to get out there that,
Well, now that Jared has told us all,
yeah.
you've either known or should have known, so yes.
Yes. Well, and I'm gonna send this little 2-page that Fannie made, the appraiser update is short, but very informational and helpful. And it pretty much says, their last line says Form 1007 cannot be used to estimate the nightly fee for short-term rental. They basically say, because they're saying, oh, it's based on daily rates or nightly, weekly, whatever. I mean, they're saying, don't do it. And I will send a link to Willow if you guys are interested in looking at it online.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yes.
But
Oh,
in my opinion, it doesn't matter what the long-term rental was, you still have to go to a long-term property manager and say, hey, is this market? Is this what can be in the future? Is
Right.
this, was this a relative? Was,
Right.
I mean, you need the details because the number could be erroneous.
that's right. And if we're just putting in the number and not really backing it up with, hey,
So we might as well go to the property managers and just get the information from them. They'll be glad to supply. There's not that much of a demand for it, you know.
I think that opinion was not shared by everybody, that they have no incentive to do it. They don't have to put it in.
All you gotta do is tell members of the companies that this is an important item and they're gonna instruct their person to do it. I mean, it doesn't take long to.
I wish it was and I do plan on reaching out to the property managers.
Go have a one-on-one with.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't have to talk to the property manager, you just talk to the owners of the
Right.
companies.
right.
Laura had a question on chat, and that looks like someone else does as well.
Let's see, from Ann, many times read.
You go down to the chat at the bottom, there's a little button.
I see it. Hold on.
It's so hard to do.
So Anna's saying his rental projections don't help, so it would be a great deal of work for the rental companies to do for nothing. I mean, that's I'm not, Dan pretty much said they don't care, that, and they're not gonna put it in MLS, it is a lot of work for them to do. You're right, and this is kind of the dilemma and the problem, with this information. The projections help, because I like to see the projections. Why? Because if these property managers who rent property all day can say, hey, we could get $3,000 a month for this house, I want to know that. And if someone is buying it based on the expectation of getting $3,000 a month in long-term rent, then that's good to know. So while we do have to have actual rentals, the projection to me is important. And again, it shows any type of market conditions change. If it was renting for 2,900 last year and they think they can get 3,000 this year, it helps. So the projection really is more of a current and potential future, but the actual rentals is what we have to have for this form. So yes, it is going to cause more work for the rental managers, and I don't know that they want to do it, but this is kind of the issue.
It's 30 days to cut off.
It says monthly, but again,
So if I
any
rent- if I-
30-day rental is going to include utilities and furniture, so there would still have to be some sort of adjustment made for those things in my analysis.
So if I
Because
had 6 30-day rentals,
Mhm.
$3,000 a week,
Mhm.
is that $18,000 I can claim as long-term rental?
Oh, no, it would basically, you're saying 6 at 3, 18,000, so then that 18,000 would have to be divided by 12. So you would go back down then to an average monthly. So that's not gonna do you much good.
I have a page for you.
Yes,
Okay, because the long-term people, they're like, yeah, we have plenty of homes, but they still want to attract. People who own the homes to go with their company as opposed to the other company,
right,
right?
right,
So do like the short-term rental companies do and make a beautiful advertising projection that says, we're the best for all these reasons, and here's my lovely brand, and just put them listing.
and everybody talks so much about short term. And I realize the appeal of a short term at the beach, they want to come stay in it 1 or 2 weeks out of the year, or they want, somewhere for their family to come, and they don't want to commit to having someone in their house long term, and they are not really up to date with what's going on in their house. I get it. But there may be people out there going, hey, oh my gosh, you mean I can get this much per month, and I only pay long-term commissions are much cheaper than
Yeah.
short, so I'm actually gonna come out better on the back end, and there are certain properties that actually, the bottom number is better as a long-term rental than a short-term. Maybe they're not thinking about it. Right, yeah, they're gonna have to rent a hotel room if they're gonna do that, I guess it'd be long-term, and again, I get the appeal of short-term in this resort area, but long-term is. Some people buy and I guess don't plan to move here until they retire next year. If they see the house that they want, they may go ahead and purchase it and come later. So they may be looking more of a long-term, rental until they get here. And I think maybe we should just start having the conversation more about long-term rentals versus short-term. Yes. So. I appreciate everyone's time, and are there any other questions?
Thank you, Jared.
You're welcome. Any long-term rental information, just I'm here to beg for it. I don't mind begging for it, so. And there more chats.
You have, no. Yes, no, long-term, short-term, don't you have?
Well, is Maggie still on here? No, she left. Maggie, are you still here? I see your comment. Okay,
So I
Um,
read Maggie's comment.
yeah, as a short-term property manager, I'd be doing everyone a disservice by giving any sort of estimate of long-term rent. It's not the arena I focus on, and I'd be fearful of giving inaccurate information. I get it, and it's been. I understand that there's no benefit for the rental managers to give us
But
information.
You've got certain ones out there, certain firms that take the time to advertise it on
Right.
Facebook.
Right,
I can name 4 or 5 right off
Yes.
the bat that do long-term
Yes.
rentals. Those are the ones we need to target to get.
Right.
MLS.
right,
I mean,
It's just like Maslow's system.
you know, and I agree with Maggie, and what she says, she would be doing you a disservice because that's not her
Mm-hmm. Right.
area.
right,
You know, but there are ones out there that.
Right.
It is their area.
right, right.
So.
It seems to me that if they fail to do it, if it's not in the contract, they should put that in the contract and you get a material breach of that contract if they don't do it. Because that's part of the cooperation, and I would want to
Right.
know.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Well, and as a representing a buyer, if there's a long-term tenant there, aren't you gonna get that information? Hey, we wanna know what they're paying and when they're gonna be out and what the lease agreement says and, so there are conversations being had about long-term rent, but they don't translate to any information. Very little information that I actually see in MLS.
Yes, on the MLS committee, I heard Charity's pitch, and I just put a home under contract with a long-term tenant, and it did not occur to me to put the number in there.
And again, out of the 26, only 3 of them gave the actual information. Yes.
Let's move on to this other topic.
Sure.
I forget what they're called, like a previous, that we use for loans that are based on the income of the property.
DTI.
Right, those loans.
DSR,
Yes.
yes. DCSR, debt coverage.
It's like, can you
DCR.
explain those a little bit, because I think a lot of those are, now this has something to do with long.
Right.
Or short term, and they're based on projections a lot of times, not necessarily based on.
So I do commercial appraisal as well. I don't do a lot of it, but my original apprenticeship and when I first got in the appraisal business, I was at ECU, and there's tons of commercial properties in Greenville and they're all fairly consistent. And I really liked commercial appraisal because it is numbers based. I find that residential appraisal, there's so much emotion that goes into buying or selling a house. Sometimes it can be frustrating, but most commercials just about numbers, So the DCR ratio, the debt coverage ratio, basically your commercial lenders want to know the expenses of a property. They want to know. And if you've got a higher than average tax bill or insurance bill or, whatever, they want to see it. So basically in a commercial appraisal, you do the market rent or, hey, this property can do X amount in income per year. You take out a vacancy and collection, which if you're doing seasonal rentals here, that's kind of already built in. Like, hey, it does X amount in a year. That's already accounted for. And then you start chomping away at the income for all of your expenses, if you're paying electricity, yard, CAM fees for condos, taxes, insurance, whatever, and you're left with net income. That net income is before the debt service payment. So that net income factor then is divided by the mortgage payment. And a lot of lenders require like a 1.25.
Okay.
So that would be the ratio they need to make the loan. So basically the net income needs to be 25% more than the annual mortgage debt service amount.
Can you just give me the division again, what's the denominator, what's the numerator?
The top number would be your net operating income. So that's everything before your mortgage payment, taxes, insurance, everything, all of your operating expenses, management, divided by the annual amount of the mortgage. If the mortgage is $3,000 a month times 12, $36,000 a year. Yes, and they have different ratios, but the last time I checked, it was like 1.25.
So is that operating expenses or does it include depreciation?
No depreciation, operating expenses.
Debt service.
Yeah, not debt service. That is kind of what you would leave that out of it.
Yes.
Sure, you need to.
Yeah,
Or
So-
MAI.
yes. I don't use it. I don't use it, and I've had a lot of thought lately, like, why did I spend all that time and money doing it? Because I have found it extremely difficult here. Again, the lack of data. Oh my gosh. And because I've been stuck in the residential world all these years, I don't have the historic data. I don't have the historic rentals. And I basically have to start everything from scratch, and the time it takes has been really frustrating. Yes,
Okay, so another topic.
Yes.
since I Feel like we got time. The way we label sound fronts.
Mhm.
Isn't there a difference in value? Because our definition is so broad, shouldn't we have more specific, definitions of sound fronts?
that's brought up. I don't know the liability and all of that, and I don't know. Some things have come up recently about definitions, because we have so many different types of waterfront here. I personally, Currituck clubs where we've got that HOA sound front, I don't call them sound fronts, they're semi-sound fronts all day long in my book.
So most people,
Village and Ag's Head, the golf course is the sound front, you don't own any actual water frontage, you can't build a pier to get to it, I mean, it's, to me, it's semi-sound front, it's not sound front.
oh, I see, so you break it faster and quicker by going into semi-sound fronts, that if that was, okay.
Yes.
If you can smell the salt there.
Would be-
I don't
We
see
don't-
salt there myself.
Well, no, it smells like septic most of the
Yeah.
time, but,
It's like our definition to the beach, we have two different ways of saying, is it the first row, second row, third row?
Right.
Is it pushing front, or, what's the other, what do we say, besides row, we say what?
more,
Oh, there's this many back and then.
Oh,
there's-
more than five,
Five lots.
more than four, or something like that.
Oh, third row.
Yeah, and fourth, I think, too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think we're.
We say two
To, in trying to change, like in the curricula clause, especially commercial, like I said, is that changing the definition, since we've done it a certain way for so long, messes with comps. So that was kind of what I remember from the discussion of the MLS committee.
I think we just kind of dropped it. It was one of those that we hit a wall in the discussion.
It was some definitions and we were just like,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah,
Should join you on another committee podcast.
you should. It's been I have really enjoyed it. I wasn't for sure about it to begin with, but I've really enjoyed it because it's opened my eyes to see how you guys look at the information and what goes into putting it in MLS. And I'm the receiver, I'm the receiver of that information. And again, we rely on it so much for everything, because I don't go in every home that I use as a comp. I don't call every agent involved. I only really call agents if it looks like there might have been, hey, was this a distress sale? What's going on here? Really, what was the condition? Hey, county has that it sold for 10,000 more than what you put in MLS, that's usually why I start calling agents. Other than that, I take it to be true. And it is on me. If I use something that's not true, even if it's in MLS and down the road, it turns out not to be true and it causes an issue, with a loan or whatever, I'm on the hook because I should be verifying this information, but I don't have that kind of time. I'm going to take it for what it says most of the time.
I'm assuming you have insurance to cover.
Yes, I do. I do. And that's why I've been such a stickler on, like heated living area and, hey guys, just because it's heated, don't mean you can call it heated, like there are definitions and requirements for heated living area. And so I'm just very,
In the book.
yes, hey, there's this nice little pamphlet here. And, I'm just very concerned and interested in improving the quality of information in our MLS. Again, I realize I use it in a very different way. Y'all will probably never search for long-term rental information in MLS. You guys aren't using it in that way, I'm guessing. I don't.
You never know. I get weird. Hey, I'm gonna search for something weird. I use the word search, like
Yeah,
probably more than.
Yeah, I get, and, I've even kind of maybe mentioned to some of the other appraisers getting a database together, like in a shared Excel or something that, hey, can we just start putting some long-term rentals in here that we can share, you know, because I know the other appraisers, like Ann said, it's so difficult to find this information. I know they're going through the same problems, you
Is
know.
that perceived as being proprietary information?
Well, then that's another question. Like if I happen to know of a rental and I appraise a house that's a rental, I didn't particularly ask the owner. I doubt, you know, I'm probably not gonna ask the owner whether I have permission to share it. You know, I should if I'm sharing it, you
Is it
know.
Public information anywhere?
No, it wouldn't be public at all. It would go in an appraisal that could end up God knows where in MLS and Associated Docs. You know, I've seen a handful in there.
You're not supposed to do that.
No, it's not public in any way, but you know, we're so desperate for it. Again, I've had to quote Craigslist as my source in an appraisal report, and I hate it, you know, but sometimes I have no other choice. And Facebook is good, like Outer Banks Housing, they're good about going, property no longer available, you know, code, property no longer available. So if that thing sat out there for a week and it's no longer available, I'm gonna assume that they rented it for what they were asking for it, you know, and I'm gonna go with it. Again, I don't have time to call every single agent to confirm every single rental and every single sale, and they're just not paying me enough to do that, spend that kind of time. Even though, yes, I could be on the hook for using wrong information, but. Anywho. I appreciate everybody's time. I'm doing the YPN, that first Friday in June. And the best topic we could come up with was ask an appraiser, just a Q&A, maybe. I think the YPN is mainly for newer agents, I guess, maybe.
We're trying to encourage them.
Yeah.
Want to
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they.
Like young people, whatever, just show up, please.
Well, and I told him, I was like, you know, everybody's so scared to call us and talk to us about anything, but that's, you know,
I don't want to.
Yeah.
it's not fair housing. I am to report any type of, you know, you can't call me and threaten to sue me if I don't appraise it for X amount, or offer to buy me dinner, or send me to the spa. You can't do any of that kind of stuff, but we.
Young,
Yeah.
young,
Oh, I got it.
young. At heart.
Yep.
Right?